4 to 12. And anything younger, anybody younger than that? Not anything, they are humans. Anybody younger than that, you're free to go with your child and hang out with Pastor Lucas. So go ahead and follow Pastor Lucas.
All right. The fun is outside. Yeah, yesterday I tried to mow my lawn, and the rain kept interrupting my work, my hayfield, and then my mower is dying, a slow death. So it takes me a little bit longer. But anyway, maybe we'll get some sunshine one of these days. Apparently, somebody must be praying for rain because we've been getting a bit of that. Underline all of these things that I have learned is a truth, and I've just shared a little bit of that. I'll probably talk a little bit about it through the 4 weeks. And in a world where it's very difficult to trust, one of the things that have really stuck with me is the incredible faithfulness of God in these 42 years of my full-time ministry. And, it's like trying to, what we focus on, we become like. That really is the core of worship. We worship, we don't sing these songs because there's some kind of, edict that God is saying you have to sing, or we do it because He created us to become like what we focus upon. And so when we focus on Him, we become like Him. When we become like Him, we become what He created us to be. And so His faithfulness, and I trust that through my experiences of seeing God's faithfulness through the years, has helped me to become more faithful. And, the more I focus on His faithfulness, the more that gets modeled into my life. Well, I'm going to share with you this morning, beginning, some of the lessons that I've learned. And, again, so what's involved in that is me going back and remembering. And a number of years ago, I was leading some kind of a group gathering, and somebody heard me talking about marriage or something like that, and they phoned me. They were very upset with me because they thought I was cold and calloused and uncaring, and which might be true. But as we go through this, going back into memories, it could be emotional for me. So don't try to save me from my emotions. Emotions have sometimes a life of their own, and I'm probably in a little bit of a season of my life where I'm a little bit more like Pastor Arlo. Okay, and when I was a kid growing up, Pastor Arlo could read the Sunday school paper and weep. Okay, and we would just look at him like, "Are you okay?" But so it's I'm a little more emotional at this point in time. It's not just because I'm old; it's just the season of my life. I will get through it and just relax, and if the little emotions come out, we'll all survive. Well, 42 years of ministry in Prince George. Prince George is the only place that I pastored, and in May of 1979, Trish, Mark, and I drove into Prince George. Mark was 1 month old. For some reason, doesn't remember that experience of coming down the hill past the jail. And at that time, when we came in 1979, you had to cross the old bridge. And that made Prince George, when I was coming down into First Avenue, I'm thinking to myself, this is Prince George? Oh my goodness. eventually I saw the rest of it and realized that First Avenue might be the first look, but it wasn't necessarily the complete picture of what Prince George was really like. But I remember that day, and I remember the excitement that I felt. I was finally going to be able to be a pastor. Somebody wanted me. Well, they'd never met me, but... And because what happened in the fall of 1978, Elam Chapel in Melita, Manitoba. Many years later, Trish and I drove through Melita just to see what we missed out on. Melita, Manitoba phoned me and asked me to come and try out to be their pastor. And I was so pumped and excited. Yeah, I'm good. And Pastor Marlowe from Melita, yeah. And 2 weeks before I was supposed to go there, they phoned me and said, we had a guy come and preach in our service. We liked him so much, we voted on him. He's our pastor, so thanks, but you don't have to come now. I was crushed. I was rejected. And to make matters worse, it was a young guy that I went to Bible school with. And so he became their pastor, and me, I was still sitting in Thunder Bay going, oh no, what's going to happen? But God had other plans. Pastor Arlo lived in with my mom. They lived in Peterborough, and he was asked to come out to Prince George to preach for the call. And he asked me this question, would you be willing to come with me? And since I had just been rejected, and I was extremely open, I didn't even have to pray about it. When you only have, you pray because you have options. When you don't have options, you just do. I knew that God was calling me into ministry. He was giving me an option. I was saying, yeah, I'll be glad to come. So, sight unseen, I was accepted as the assistant pastor at the Prince George Pentecostal Tabernacle to start May 1st, 1979. Interestingly, when we drove down that hill, when we came into Prince George for the first time, I had a sense that we would be here a long time. And I even thought, I can remember this, I even thought that this might be the only place that I pastor. And so this is part of the requirements. If you're going to stay someplace for 42 years, you either have to change people or you have to change yourself. You can't stay the same because it becomes tiresome, right? And so transformation and renewal were something that had to take place in my life. And over the next few weeks, I'll share with you some of the lessons that I learned. The good thing about this is I'm not here to tell you to do anything. See, lots of times we have messages, we're trying to get a point across. I'm not trying to get any point across. I'm just here to share with you what I've learned. And whatever the Holy Spirit wants to do with you, that's His job. And hopefully you can learn something, or you can say that was a nice story, or whatever else as we go through these lessons that I've learned. 1 Corinthians 13, Paul shares something that was important for me. It says this. He says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child. But when I grew up, I put away childish things. Now, here's what we know about children. They are extremely self-focused. When they're hungry, they cry. When they want something, they let you know. They're self-focused. So Paul is saying, when he was a child, he reasoned and thought like a child. Well, you see, when I came to Prince George in ministry, I was a child in ministry. I was a baby. And I can remember so clearly my childlike thinking and reasoning. And I realized that at some point, if I didn't stop thinking and reasoning as a child in ministry, it was going to be trouble for me. That I had to learn how to grow up in ministry. So one of the first things that I had to learn, actually probably one of the most difficult lessons that I had to learn, was the lesson of disappointment. How to overcome disappointments. See, I came to Prince George full of ideals, full of hopes, full of dreams about what ministry would be like, about what God was going to do, that people would actually listen and respond. That was my expectation. And I was excited, and it wasn't too long before I began to realize that it was a lot different than what I had expected it to be. I still remember to this day. I have a picture in my mind of this young girl. One of the things that we did when we first came to Prince George was we got involved in doing children's ministries, and we went. Unlike the VBS, what we did is we took the ministry out to areas where there were children, unchurched children, and at that time when we came in the late 70s, Sherwood Park. Down by 20th, what would have been a Sherwood Court, and the housing that was there. There were a lot of kids there, and so we went and we did a children's ministry there. And then we did another children's ministry in a place, apartment complex called Park Village over on Ospika, trying to reach out to children, and we did that for a number of years. I remember that we did a day camp with some of the kids, a smaller group of kids, and we took them all day out to a small little regional park out by Ness Lake. And there was a young girl that came to the first activities that we did, and I just remember this young girl and the beautiful smile and the eagerness to hear the things that we shared, and but probably within the next couple of years, somebody told me that knew this young girl that she committed suicide. I was devastated. Devastated that well, disappointed that I didn't do more. Lots of emotions with that devastation. That she was so broken that she didn't find any other option in her mind other than to take her life. And I began to realize that disappointments were going to become a part of my life and ministry. That things were going to happen outside of my control. And I can remember over the next decade plus, where from time to time I would, as I was going about Prince George, I would run into her father to see him. And every time I saw him, that pain and disappointment came back again. I was so helpless. I felt so helpless. I remember, I could literally just share with you stories. But I remember working with a student in the school, and I poured my life into this student's life, and just way above and beyond what I would normally do, because the need was there, and I really felt that God was giving me an opportunity to make a difference in this young man's life. And I still remember the day that he came into my office and told me that he was leaving the school and he didn't want my help anymore. I was devastated. My office used to be right over there. I remember he walked out of the office and I just wept. I knew the heartache that was waiting him. I knew the struggle. I knew the opportunity that I had. The door was closing. It was very difficult. Jesus, in his last earthly message to his disciples before his death on the cross, said a lot of things to them. But one of them sticks out to me, and he shares this in the Gospel of John. I think it's in chapter 16 where he says, "But the time is coming, indeed it is here now, when you will be scattered. Each one going his own way, leaving me alone. Yet I am not alone because the Father is with me. I have told you all this so that you will have peace in me. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows." That was his promise to his followers, I thought. How true. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. See, a part of growing up, a part of our maturing is to overcome the disappointments that we face in life. Jesus modeled that for us, and we can overcome because of what he did. Once I got over the shock of disappointments early on and began to learn how to overcome them, I started to grow up. But growing up doesn't mean that the disappointments stop. It just helps you to handle more disappointments. I have a little note in here to myself. It says, "I am emotional just writing this in preparation." See, disappointments come because we have certain expectations. I thought the second time would be easier. Maybe third time. But brought my Kleenex, so I'm all right. This is Pastor Arlo. Remember that? You remember him? Of course, the greatest disappointment that I've had to face is very, very fresh. And that's the loss of my partner, Trish. But even in this, God is challenging me to be an overcomer, to be a man and not a child. You see, a child wants to quit because it's too hard or it's too painful. But Paul said, a man puts away childish thinking. And to put away that childish thinking, we have to ask the question, okay, God, what's next? What do you have for me? What's next? I'm certain that I have more disappointments that I have yet to face. But I know that through the power and the grace that God living in me gives me, I will be able to overcome. James many years ago. I spent a whole year in the book of James. I could see it on people's face when I'd say, we're going to speak from James, and they'd go, oh, brother, here he goes, back in James. James 1, verses 2 to 4 says, Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. It doesn't feel like joy, but it's an opportunity for joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow, for when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Well, maturity, or to be mature, is an advanced stage in a process. We're in this process of becoming mature. A counselor, I read this book by a counselor, and he was dealing with people who had hurts and pains and struggles, and he says, the first thing that you do is you need to look at your struggle. You need to look at what you're wrestling with, and you need to figure out which ones are your fault, and then you need to figure out which ones are just life. And then you have to practice overcoming whatever it is that you faced. You need to make plans to confront parts of your life, probably the childish part of your life. And you do that in a truthful, open, and courageous manner. And this is what he said. This is not a Christian who's writing this. He said this. He said, it is unbelievable how strong and courageous people can become. It is miraculous what sort of load people can bear when they take it on voluntarily. See, if you just let life control you, it wins. But if you face life and say, you know what, no matter what I'm going to face, God, you're here with me, and I take the challenge. I'll take the challenge of those disappointments. Consider the disappointment, the hurt, the challenge as an opportunity to grow. Embrace the challenge. I'm reminded of a message that Rob Tower shared many years ago, where he talked about Jonathan and his armor bearer. And it kind of goes like this, a paraphrase. It's found in 1 Samuel 14. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come on, let's go over to where the Philistines are. They were battling. They were at war against them. Let's go to where there's a problem. Let's see what's going on. But he didn't tell anybody else that he was going to do this, because they would have told him, don't do that. Don't do that. And to get there was difficult. They had to go through rough terrain to get there. He said to his armor bearer, let's go over and see what's happening. Perhaps the Lord will help us. For nothing can hinder the Lord. He can win a battle whether he has many warriors or only a few. So the armor bearer said to him, okay, do what you want. Do what you think. I'm with you completely, whatever you decide. All right, then Jonathan said, let's cross over. We'll let them see us. And if they say, stay here or we'll kill you, then we'll go home. But if they say, come up and fight, then we'll go up. Because that's the sign that the Lord is going to help us to defeat them. When the Philistines saw them coming, they shouted, look, the Hebrews are crawling out of their holes. Then the men from the outpost shouted to Jonathan, come on up here. We'll teach you a lesson. Well, they did. They taught them about the power of God. See, they didn't realize they were going to be the lesson taught. They thought they were going to teach them a lesson by dealing with them. They were dealt with. And Jonathan and the armor bearer understood the power of God. But it's interesting, describes how they got there. They had to climb and like crawling with their hands and feet. And when they got up there, 20 men they killed. Their bodies were scattered all over, it says about half an acre. We're called, we're challenged to embrace the disappointment, the difficulty, the things that we face. And James tells the church, which is us, that when this happens, when we face those challenges, we will become mature. Well, whatever God has left for me, and people ask me, they ask me a couple of questions. You can imagine what the questions are. How are you? And I say to them, I'm fine. I'm not sure what fine means, and I'm not sure what how are you really means either. Do you mean at this moment? Do you mean over the long term, or do you mean, But finishing well is important to me. And just because my June is the end of my full-time ministry, I'm not finished. I don't know what's next. I had expectations of what was coming. They all changed. So I don't know. I'm going to the fishing hole to see if perhaps God might not give me some clues as to what's next. At least a little inkling of what's next besides the big fish. They're waiting for me. I know that. They're hiding from me too. But this time I think I'm going to find one of them, or 2 or 10 or whatever the limit is. But James finished well. And history tells us that James, the brother of Jesus, died a martyr. He was taken to the pinnacle of the temple, or the top of the temple, and he was thrown down. The fall didn't kill him, and then he was beaten to death with a club. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. So I recognize that I'll have to continue to face disappointments, but I will continue to move forward and embrace the challenges that are before me. The challenges that the enemy wants to use to destroy and to discourage us. But God says will only make you stronger. It's a funny thing about exercise, You start thinking, I gotta exercise. Then you do your exercise and it's finished. And then as soon as you're finished, you go, I gotta do that tomorrow. And the day after, and the day after, and the day after. See, every day. So the challenges come. Paul in 2 Corinthians 12:7-9 said this. He said, so to keep me from being proud, I was given a thorn in my flesh. A messenger from Satan to torment me and to keep me from becoming proud. 3 different times I begged the Lord to take it away. That speaks of pain. Not physical pain, but just pain. The pain of what he was facing. He begged God to take that away from him. Each time, God said to him, my grace is all you need. But you didn't answer my question. Take my pain. No, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now, this is what Paul learned. So now, I am glad to boast about my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ can work through me. That's why I take pleasure in my weaknesses and in the insults, hardships, and persecutions and troubles I suffer for Christ. For when I am weak, then I am strong. So what he's saying? Don't avoid the disappointments. Embrace them. Embrace them. Voluntarily embrace them. And let God use them in your life. That's one of the things that I had to learn over 42 years. I'm a slow learner. And I'm confident that the lessons aren't over yet. That I have still more disappointments that I have to face. So that I can become stronger, more complete, more mature. Heavenly Father, thank you for each person here today. Thank you for your faithfulness. As we focus on you, as we worship you, who you are becomes more of who we become. And we want to become mature. We want to think and reason in maturity. Not as a child, not self-focused, but you-focused. Recognizing that you have a purpose and a plan for each of our lives. And we're so grateful for your goodness and your faithfulness. And help us to be faithful to the calling that you have given to each one of us as individuals. Thank you for each person. Bless each person now. In Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. And next week, part 2. Have a great week.